My name is Jenna Armstrong, and for a long time I truly believed I had built the kind of life people envy. I was 34, an accountant at a mid-sized firm, living in a tidy bungalow just outside Seattle with my husband David. We'd been together nearly a decade. To the outside world and, honestly, to myself, we were the definition of stability. We didn't live extravagantly. We had a sensible mortgage, a pair of reliable cars, and enough savings that I slept easy at night. As an accountant, I was meticulous. Every bill paid on time, every expense tracked, every line of our monthly budget neatly categorized and reconciled. And David, he was the person I trusted most. He worked in real estate, which meant his income could be uneven, but he always assured me he was handling things. And I believed him. Looking back, there were small signs. Tiny cracks in the polished veneer I didn't want to see. There were the nights he came home later and later, smelling faintly of cigarettes he claimed he didn't smoke. The phone calls he took in the garage, doors closed, voice hushed. The months when he said he was between commissions, but still insisted we were fine. But I told myself he was under pressure, that I was overthinking everything. After all, we were a team. We'd built this life together. I never once thought he'd lie to me about something that mattered. I wish I could tell you the moment I realized something was wrong. The truth is, I didn't. Not until the day everything shattered. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was at my desk working through invoices when the receptionist buzzed my phone. "There are two gentlemen here to see you," she said, her voice oddly tight. "Who are they?" I asked. "They said they're with—" She paused, as though reading from a card. "Cambridge Recovery Group." I frowned. I'd never heard of them. "Did they say why they're here?" "They said it's about an urgent personal matter." I almost didn't go down. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, but curiosity, or maybe some hidden instinct, got the better of me. I walked to the lobby, smoothing my skirt, trying to look composed. The two men waiting for me were dressed in dark suits, holding a thick folder. "Mrs. Armstrong?" the taller one asked. I nodded. "I'm sorry to intrude on your workday. We need a moment of your time." He handed me the folder. "Unfortunately, we've been retained to collect on this debt." The world seemed to narrow. I flipped open the folder. Pages and pages of statements, loan agreements, overdue notices, every one of them with my name at the top. I felt the blood drain from my face. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. "I never opened these accounts." He gave me a pitying look. "I understand this is a shock, but the signatures are verified. The outstanding balance is over $300,000. I shook my head. "No," I said, voice rising. "This isn't right. But the papers didn't vanish. The debt didn't dissolve because I willed it to." I felt as though the ground had tilted under me, as though I'd slipped into someone else's nightmare. "We're willing to give you time to arrange payment plans," the man continued, as if we were discussing a parking ticket instead of the end of my life as I knew it. I don't remember what I said next. I think I just mumbled something about needing to call my husband. But even as I spoke, a sick realization was blooming in my gut. Because there was only one person who could have done this. One person who had access to all my information. One person I had trusted without question. I clutched the folder so tightly my knuckles turned white. And I knew that when I went home, I would have to face the truth I'd been trying so hard not to see. Without it again. I don't remember the drive home. I couldn't have told you which roads I took, or what time it was when I pulled into the driveway. All I remember is the folder on the passenger seat staring up at me like an accusation. $300,000, my name on every page. By the time I stepped into the house, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the doorknob. David was in the kitchen, stirring pasta sauce on the stove. He looked up with a smile that turned my stomach. "Hey babe, you're home early." I set the folder down on the counter between us. What is this? He glanced at it, his expression unchanged. For one surreal moment, I thought maybe he'd pretend he didn't know. Maybe he'd act confused, make up a story, try to talk his way out. But as he flipped it open and saw the first page, the color drained from his face. Jenna, I held up a hand. Just don't start with excuses. I want the truth. He closed his eyes like he was trying to will himself somewhere else. It's not what you think, he started. No? My voice cracked. Because it looks exactly like what I think. Like you've been forging my name and gambling away everything we have. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. How long, David? How many years have you been lying to me? His eyes flicked to the window, to the floor, anywhere but my face. 2 years, he whispered. I felt something in my chest splinter. 2 years, I repeated. While I was budgeting every penny, while I was trusting you, I was going to pay it back. He cut in, voice rising. I had it under control. I laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. $300,000? Under control. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand. I just needed one big win. One time, and it would have fixed everything. I pressed my palms flat on the counter to keep from collapsing. Did you ever think about what this would do to me? To us? His eyes finally met mine, and for the first time I saw something that chilled me even more than the betrayal. Resentment. Like this was somehow my fault for discovering it. You were always so obsessed with tracking every dime, he said quietly. It made me feel like nothing I did was ever good enough. I stared at him, stunned. You're blaming me? He didn't answer, and in that silence, something in me hardened. I had spent years believing we were partners, that we shared the same goals, the same values. But in the end, all my careful planning, all my trust, meant nothing to him. I walked past him to the bedroom, closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands, trying to breathe around the crushing weight in my chest. I thought of every little moment that should have warned me. The nights he came home late and smelled like stale air and cigarette smoke. The unexplained withdrawals. The nervous way he'd glance at me when I asked about money. But I'd wanted so badly to believe in the story we'd built together that I ignored it all. And now, the wreckage was sitting in my name. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at the wall. Eventually, I heard him moving around the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets like nothing had happened. The ordinariness of it made me feel sick. I picked up my phone with numb fingers and scrolled to my best friend Marissa's name. When she answered, I couldn't even form words. Jenna, she said, alarmed. What's wrong? The dam broke. I told her everything, voice shaking, tears streaming down my face. When I finally stopped, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said the thing I hadn't let myself think yet. You know you can't stay. I closed my eyes. I knew. That night, after Marissa hung up, I sat in the dark for hours. My mind felt like it was spinning around the same impossible question. How could he do this to me? How do you share a bed with someone who is quietly destroying you? How do you smile across the dinner table at a man forging your name on loan applications? Eventually, when the house had gone silent, I turned on the bedside lamp and began sorting through the folder page by page. The deeper I read, the sicker I felt. It wasn't just a few credit cards. It was everything. There were multiple loans, some from big banks, some from shady lenders I'd never heard of. Statements showing cash advances, wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, payment notices from casinos I'd never stepped foot in. On one page, I saw my signature scrawled at the bottom of a $75,000 line of credit. It looked so much like my handwriting that for a split second, I almost wondered if I'd forgotten signing it. Then I looked closer and saw the slight tilt of the letters, The way the loop on the J hooked wrong. He'd practiced forging it. I thought about every time he'd joked that he knew me better than anyone. He hadn't been joking. He knew exactly how to steal from me and how to hide it so well I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I pulled out my laptop, opened our online banking, and started combing through transactions. My stomach lurched as I realized how much he'd covered up. He'd routed payments through an old joint account I rarely checked, transferred balances between credit cards so nothing looked past due, used my email address to set up paperless statements that never came to our house. I had trusted him with everything, and he'd used that trust like a weapon. Around 3 a.m., I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. In that moment, I felt something shift. I was done feeling sorry for him. I was done feeling sorry for myself. This was not a mistake. It was a choice. 1,000 little choices he'd made over years to lie, to cover his tracks, to gamble our life away. And no amount of love would ever make it okay. When the sun came up, I hadn't slept a second. I pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt and walked into the kitchen. David was sitting at the table, scrolling his phone as if nothing had happened. He looked up, his eyes wary. "Jenna." I held up a hand. "I don't want to hear it." My voice sounded strange, almost calm. "I'm going to work," I said. "When I come home, you won't be here." He opened his mouth like he was going to argue, but I turned and walked out before he could. I sat in my car in the driveway and called an attorney. "My husband has committed financial fraud," I said, when the receptionist asked why I was calling. "I need to know how to protect myself." She transferred me to a lawyer who sounded sympathetic but professional. "You need to file for divorce," he said, "immediately, and you need to freeze any joint accounts before he drains them." I wrote everything down on a notepad, my hand steady. When I hung up, I felt clearer than I had in months. I drove to the bank next. The woman at the counter looked surprised when I asked to close our joint savings and transfer the balance to my name. I'd never done anything without consulting David. But as I signed the forms, a tiny thrill of freedom pulsed in my chest. This was mine now. The first thing that belonged only to me in a very long time. I left the bank with new account papers in my purse and a plan forming in my mind. I would not let him ruin me. I would not let him steal another dollar, another hour, another piece of who I was. I was going to fight back. I didn't go straight home after the bank. Instead, I parked in a grocery store lot and sat behind the wheel, feeling the reality of what I'd just done. I'd closed our accounts. I'd started the process of protecting myself, and I knew the next step would be the hardest one: divorce. I had never imagined that word would apply to me, not to the girl who used to daydream about growing old with her husband in our tidy little house, not to the woman who believed love was enough to survive anything. But I'd learned something in the last 24 hours. Love without trust is just a trap you walk into willingly. I called Marissa again. When she answered, I didn't even have to explain why I was calling. "Tell me what you need," she said. "Will you come over tonight?" I whispered. "I don't want to be alone when I tell him I'm filing." "Of course," she said. "Text me when you get home." I hung up, drew in a shaky breath, and finally started the car. When I stepped inside the house, David was exactly where I'd left him, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. He looked up, eyes bloodshot. "Jenna, please," he started. I raised a hand to stop him. "I've spoken to an attorney," I said quietly. "I've frozen our accounts. I'm filing for divorce." He flinched like I'd hit him. "You don't mean that," he said. His voice cracked, and for a second I almost believed the tears gathering in his eyes. But then I remembered the forged signatures, the hidden loans. The resentment in his voice when he said I made him feel like nothing he did was good enough. "I do mean it," I said. "I meant every word." He stood up so fast his chair scraped across the tile. "After everything I've done for you." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Everything you've done to me." His jaw clenched. "You're throwing away our marriage over money." "No," I said softly. "I'm ending it because you lied to me every day for 2 years. Because you stole from me. Because you made me feel like I was crazy for asking questions." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "You think you'll be better off alone?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because the answer was written on every page of that folder. I was already better off alone. When Marissa arrived, she didn't say a word. She just hugged me, and for the first time in days, I let myself cry. After, we sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the paperwork while David paced the living room, muttering to himself. At one point, he came over and slammed his palm on the table. "You can't do this. You're ruining everything." Marissa looked up at him with a calm, cold stare. "She's not ruining anything," she said. "You did that yourself." He stared at her, then at me, his expression twisted with something between rage and desperation. "Fine," he spat. "You want to play hardball? I'll see you in court." I didn't flinch. "Good," I said. "I'm counting on it." That night, after he finally left to stay with his brother, Marissa helped me pack a suitcase. She insisted I come stay at her apartment for a few days. When we drove away from that house, I felt an unexpected wave of relief. The place I had once called home had become a crime scene, a monument to everything I'd lost. But as the headlights illuminated the road ahead, I knew I'd made the right choice. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Not because I knew exactly what would happen next, but because I knew I'd never again let someone else decide my worth. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, forms, and endless explanations. I had to tell the bank manager that I hadn't signed those loan agreements. I had to sit across from a detective and recount every detail of how David had stolen from me. I had to call creditors, one by one, and hear the skepticism in their voices when I insisted it wasn't me. Every conversation started the same way. "Are you sure you didn't authorize this?" It was humiliating. I was an accountant, the person everyone trusted to balance the books, to spot the mistakes. And somehow I hadn't seen this coming. More than once, I thought I might break under the weight of it. But every time I felt myself slipping, I reminded myself, this wasn't my shame to carry. It was his. The day the detective called to confirm what I already knew, that David had forged my signature on all the applications, I felt something uncoil inside me. Validation. Proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. He'd committed fraud. He'd committed a crime. And it wasn't my job to protect him from the consequences. Moving out of the house was bittersweet. I packed my clothes and a few keepsakes into cardboard boxes. The rest, the wedding china, the framed photos, the souvenirs from trips we'd taken, felt tainted. I left them behind. When I closed the front door for the last time, I didn't look back. My new apartment was nothing special, a small second-floor unit with old carpet and creaky plumbing. But when I turned the key in the lock, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. No cameras, no hidden accounts, no secrets waiting to explode. Just 4 walls that belonged only to me. Rebuilding my credit was slow and exhausting. Every creditor needed copies of the police report. Every loan required a signed affidavit of fraud. Every conversation reopened the wound. But little by little, I started to reclaim my name. One account closed. One fraudulent charge erased. One victory at a time. There were days I wanted to give up. Days when I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by stacks of paperwork, and wondered if it would ever end. But then I'd look at the mirror and see the woman staring back at me. She wasn't weak. She wasn't naive. She wasn't broken. She was still here, and that had to count for something. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. David tried to fight it. He claimed I was overreacting, that I was ruining his life. But with every hearing, his leverage slipped away. The judge reviewed the evidence, hundreds of pages of forged signatures, hidden debts, casino withdrawals, and sided with me. In the end, David walked away with nothing. No house, no money, no more power over me. I'll never forget the day my lawyer called to say the final decree was signed. "You're officially divorced," he said. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt empty. Because no matter how right this ending was, it was still an ending. And endings hurt. That night, I made myself a promise. I would mourn what I lost, but I would also celebrate what I'd saved. My name, my credit, my dignity. No one was ever going to take those from me again. The first morning I woke up in my new apartment, the sun was pouring through the curtains. I lay there for a long time, listening to the quiet. No footsteps in the hallway. No hushed phone calls I wasn't supposed to hear. No lies waiting to be discovered. Just silence. For the first time in years, I realized how exhausted I had been. How much of myself I'd spent trying to hold everything together while he was tearing it apart behind my back. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen and stood by the window, watching the world go by. It felt strange. Strange to be alone. Strange to be free. Strange to know that for once, I didn't have to explain or justify anything to anyone. A week later, I closed the last open dispute with the credit bureau. When the agent on the phone confirmed that my record was clear, I felt something inside me finally settle. It was over. All of it. The deception, the debt, the endless fear that another secret was about to come crashing down on me. I was done. Some nights, I still thought about the woman I used to be. The one who believed love was measured in how much you were willing to forgive. The one who thought loyalty meant ignoring every red flag. I grieved for her. But I didn't want to be her anymore. A few months later, I started seeing a therapist. At first, I thought I would sit there and talk about David, about what he'd done, about how he'd lied. But it turned out that the hardest part wasn't letting go of him. It was forgiving myself for trusting him, for not asking more questions, for ignoring the voice in my head that had tried so hard to warn me. I learned something in those sessions. Trust is not a weakness. Believing in people is not something to be ashamed of. And leaving someone who abuses your trust is not failure. It's survival. When people hear my story, they always ask the same thing. How did you find the strength to walk away? I tell them the truth. It wasn't strength. It was necessity. Because there comes a point when staying costs more than you can afford to pay. And when you reach that point, leaving isn't brave. It's the only choice you have left. A year has passed since I signed the divorce papers. My credit is restored. My finances are back under my control. My life is quiet, and sometimes a little lonely. But it's mine. All of it. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you feel that sinking dread in your gut because you already suspect someone you love is hiding things from you, please hear me. You are not imagining it. You are not crazy. And you are not alone. You don't have to stay. You don't have to keep paying for someone else's mistakes. You don't have to sacrifice your future to protect their secrets. My name is Jenna Armstrong. I am an accountant. I am a survivor. And I am finally free.